Okay, Alexander, let's do a video on the snap elections in Canada coming up on the 20th of September. The Trudeau called these elections roughly 2 years earlier than designated, these snap elections. And I find it interesting that Trudeau called these snap elections because a lot of analysts and pundits are also kind of scratching their heads wondering what was the need for Trudeau to call these elections? I mean, I know from my experience living in Greece when a government that's a parliamentary system, when the ruling government calls snap elections, they're looking to win a mandate in order to pass certain things that they have planned. And so I imagine that Trudeau is looking for that mandate, and I imagine the things he has planned are directly related to the passports, the COOF, and all the other things in and around the pandemic. So I guess he's looking for that mandate to push forward with policy that is directly related to the COOF. What do you think are the reasons for Trudeau calling these elections? Because it really is puzzling a lot of people why he's calling those elections. And to be quite honest, the polling is very tight right now between the Liberals and the Conservatives. So he may have taken a big risk by calling these elections. Once again, the polling numbers are very, very tight. Alexander, what do you think?
Well, I think that's entirely right, because I don't think he's provided the Canadian people with any convincing explanation why he needed to call elections now. The government was stable. I mean, it was a minority. I mean, I understand it was a minority government, but it was in power. There was no obvious and immediate challenge to his rule. So why did he need to call elections? He's provided no explanation, and that's caused a lot of people to question his decision to call the elections. And of course, people don't particularly like to have elections sprung on them in this kind of way, especially not at a time when, Canada, like every other country, is going through the pandemic. So I suspect that there's a lot of cynicism about this amongst Canadians. Firstly, the cynicism because they wonder what exactly he has in mind and what he's up to, and the fact that he might indeed be preparing all kinds of restrictions on people's lives, which might be extremely unpopular. I think they're also asking themselves whether perhaps Trudeau knows that things are going to get a lot more difficult in the next few years, and he wants to get an election out of the way now before those things do become more difficult. And bear in mind, Canada is affected by the worldwide inflation in just the same way that other countries are. So I think that all of this plays to people's cynicism. It plays to people's fears and insecurities. And all of this at a time when Trudeau's own position, his popularity, which was once very high, has been steadily declining as more and more people are becoming increasingly annoyed with him. I mean, some of the language that he uses, she economy, for example. I mean, things like this are, I think, increasingly starting to grate on people. And I think this is starting to crystallise opposition. I want to stress he still clearly has a lot of support in Canada, but one does sense that maybe this time he miscalculated, and that might not turn out very well for him in the end. Though there's still a way to go. The polling, as you say, is tight. Trudeau is nothing if not somebody who is going to cling on as long as he can. And it's not impossible, I think, that he could pull something together just before the end. We'll see.
Do you think this was a clever move from Trudeau? Because it was a risky move. But if he does manage to win a majority or put together a coalition and continue to rule, it was probably a very clever move because, like you said, it will give him the authority, the mandate to push forward whatever he has in mind for the next, 2, 3, 4 years going forward, and no one's going to really be able to oppose him. I mean, it will be looked at as a very politically clever move if he does manage to win.
Absolutely. I think it is on balance a clever move, though a risky one, as you say. And the fact that he's taken a risk like this, as I said, does show, to my mind, firstly, that he is under longer term pressure, probably feels that the economic situation isn't going particularly well in Canada. But secondly, I suspect he does want a renewed mandate to try to lock in his position as Prime Minister, basically for the foreseeable future. And if he's able to pull it off, I mean, he will be seen as a greatly, this will be seen as an extremely clever and skilled move on his part. And, I think that perhaps he underestimated the strength of the reaction. But he's somebody, as I said, with many cards to play, many levers to pull. And I think, it's not impossible that enough people might in the end just about come round to help him through this. If he does come through this, he will be in a stronger position than the position he was in before. I think that's how it looks to me. So I think that it's risky, but it might work. And if it doesn't work, well, from his point of view, he's been Prime Minister of Canada now for some time, so I suppose he can move on. But if it works, he's Prime Minister of Canada for a very long time. He can do all sorts of things. He can adapt the system to and shape it around himself and his needs. And, he might be actually quite close to achieving that. So we'll see how people in Canada respond.
Yeah, I believe if he wins, this will be his third. He'll be going on his third term. He was campaigning just the other day, Alexander, and he was hit with, well, the press is saying stones, but I'm getting reports that it was people throwing like dirt and gravel at him. Either way, people are extremely upset with Trudeau when they see him in person. Obviously, he does have a large base of support, specifically in the major urban areas, which doesn't come as a surprise. I mean, Trudeau does follow that neoliberal Obama Rat Pack model as a leader. Big support in the urban cities. When he leaves those urban cities, it looks like just people absolutely detest him to the point where they're throwing stuff at him. There also is not that much difference from a lockdown passport mandate stance with the Conservatives either, which leads me to believe that this is really an election about whether you like Trudeau or don't like Trudeau, whether you're afraid of what Trudeau is going to do to your country, or whether you actually like the path that Trudeau is taking your country towards. I mean, this is a referendum on Trudeau, his ideology, his neoliberalism, all of it.
That's exactly right. Can I just say, of course, what's happening in Canada is now happening right across, what used to, the West, the Western world as we once knew it. We now see massive differences and cultural differences between certain of the great urban centres and, people who live and work in the countryside, the small towns, those sort of places. They are being divided against each other by politicians like Trudeau, who are behaving with a degree of moralism and aggression that directly attacks the values of those more conservative people in the sort of regions than we've ever seen before. I mean, there've been class differences in historic time in many Western countries, the people who are right and left and disagree on many things. But I've never seen what we see today, which is, people, political movements based in the cities, which actually go out of their way to challenge and attack the values of the countryside and try to basically subjugate the countryside and its values to the regions, to their own, political ideologies and agendas. So that's what we're seeing in Canada, and that's why Trudeau is provoking some of those very strong reactions that you mentioned. But the question is whether he's still got enough support in the cities. I think even there his support has been declining to be able to pull it through. And in a kind of way, and this is what makes this so dangerous, is that, of course, the very fact that he is receiving this kind of reception will enable him to increase his calls to people in the cities to support him, because he will say that the people who threw that gravel at him represent the same kind of forces, the forces of darkness, and that he is the champion of the forces of light, and that he needs all the support he can get, because if he doesn't get it, then the forces of darkness will prevail. In other words, it's the 2020 election all over again, the 2020 election in the United States being repeated in Canada. The difference is, of course, Trudeau is the incumbent, and he's been in power now for some time. And as I said, people are, I think, increasingly cynical about him, and I think he's increasingly grating on many people. Even many of his supporters are turning against him. But that is how these leaders win, be it, Macron in France, the Biden-Harris team in the United States, Trudeau in Canada. They do so by polarizing their countries on these cultural issues.
Right, he goes on the campaign trail, he gets pelted with gravel, and he gets to play the victim and to gain more support from the
Exactly.
urban voters.
I mean, exactly, the victimhood thing, which is, of course, what is extremely. I mean, the one thing that Trudeau has two great skills. Firstly, he's very good at, the manipulative side of politics in terms, of knowing how to pull levers and pull strings and that kind of thing. And at the second thing is, he is the brilliant virtue signaler. I mean, he has taken that to a level, that even, say, Tony Blair in Britain never achieved. And this is what he will say. He says, the reason I'm being attacked in this way is because I'm the heroic person who is, as I said, the embodiment of the progressive values that all good people should believe in. In other words, another form of virtue signalling, with the implication being that whoever disagrees with him is not virtuous and is somehow, embodies the forces of regression and reaction and darkness and all that. So that's what he plays at. He's taken these sort of politics to just a further level, and he does it with some skill. But as I said, at the same time as he does that, he does annoy an awful lot of other people too.
Yeah. Maxime Bernier from the People's Party is they're more of the libertarian type of party, and I expect they're going to do well. That's my own personal opinion after reading what's going on. But the libertarian, these types of parties that want to give more power back to the people, they never seem to get in power. Do you know what I mean? No. Why is that? We're seeing it in Canada. We'll see it in France. We've seen it in the UK. Why is it that the parties that actually are telling the people, look, we're not going to put restrictions on you. We're going to give you more rights. We're going to give you more freedom. We're going to give you more power back to you, more self-reliance, more everything. We're going to give it back. We're going to have a smaller government footprint. How come these parties don't get into power? How come they can't poll higher?
Precisely because they're not interested in power. That's the fundamental problem. If you're going to give power away, then all those powerful interests and institutions that exist in your country, they don't want you to give power away. They want you to wield power in their interests. So you're going to see all kinds of powerful institutions in these societies. They're going to be drawn to the parties of power, the parties that are interested in, are focused on power, that want to use government, that want to shape things and change things, because that's what, they want an interventionist government. They don't want a libertarian one. And so it might have, in theory, a lot of attractions to many people, but you're not going to get much support from that in the media, among advertisers, amongst the power centres, the political lobby groups, the activists Remember, activists are so important in politics nowadays. All those sort of things, which together are absolutely crucial in getting people out to vote. And, and bear in mind, a lot of politics in every country revolves around patronage. Patronage, if it's to be effective, depends on, wielding power, and people who are interested in receiving patronage and who are voters will not want a party that's going to give power away, because if they want to get their kids in the right universities, if they want to get all the things that come from patronage, they want somebody who's interested in power, who's interested in exercising it, not someone who is not. So that's why libertarian parties are attractive. They get support from some people, but ultimately they will never get into power, unless there is a fundamental change in the way people think and in the way the political systems in the Western world work.
Yeah, especially the second one, the way political systems work. If that doesn't change, that's going to be very difficult for these parties to get traction.
Exactly.
All right, we'll leave it there. Go to the Duran.locals.com, ODYSEE, BitChute, Rumble, and Super U. Check out our videos there. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code REAL NEWS. Take care, everybody.